Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Clueless 8 again, and we are on the Priceline chart right now. This is the daily chart of the Priceline daily chart of Priceline.com, and I've shown this before, but let me go over this a little bit more in detail. What I see is going on. Priceline is basically testing this massive downtrend line from 1375 down to 1075. That's 300 points. I have drawn a Fibonacci retracement, and let me zoom into that so everyone can see this very clearly. Okay, these things work, and that's why I do this. So the Fibonacci retracement levels are extremely important. We have a hollow candle reversal here, followed through for 3 days, came down. Then we had the reversal last Friday. This was Monday. This is today. The damage is minimal, very much an inside day. This line here is the 9 moving average, still starting to creep up. We have a lot of resistance here on these large longer term moving averages starting to curl down. Okay, so what I'm looking to do is basically see if it can test the 150 day. Let's actually make this 200. Make it black. Okay, so the 200-day moving average is basically was tested a few times, as you can clearly see. It's bouncing, retesting this downtrend line. If it breaks above that, it tried to, which is around 1167 or 1168, then we are looking at a breakout over and into the 38 fib and the downward sloping 50-day moving average, this yellow line, okay, which is around 1203. That's a good solid 50 points from here and a lot of money to be made. So no one's talking about a massive turn where the trend just turns into another roaring Priceline type of uptrend. That would only happen over the 34 and staying above the 34 for a good number of days, and that's over 1247. So just between here and there, if it does do that, which it very well could do, this is summer season. There's a lot of Europeans who use Priceline.com. 70% of their revenues, I believe, come from Europe and Asia, primarily Europe. They love to go on vacation, whether they have money in their pockets or not. And if that happens, airline tickets are going higher. Summer season here goes well. We're looking at 1250. We're looking at basically Priceline going up to the 1300 level. So this is the stock to watch. Okay, it's still on the low end of the scale. Here's the downside. The downside is it comes down and tests the 200 day at 1130. It's only 20 points from here. For Priceline, that's 1 minute's work. Okay, both on the upside and downside, honestly speaking. So no exaggeration. We break below. This is another downside level, lower Bollinger. Let me put this Bollinger in blue so we can see it. Okay, lower Bollinger is at 1106. That's 44 points on the downside, can be played. And then if it breaks below this, which is 1086, then we're looking at some nice, we're looking to maybe 1024. I highly doubt if Priceline goes below $1,000, but who am I to say? But Priceline is a very tradable stock, and I still think that the Nasdaq is in good shape to retest the downward sloping 50-day and the 34-day moving average, which, by the way, if you notice, is still going, moving up on an uptrend. Hasn't even curled down here. So let's move on to, so that's enough for Priceline. Divergences are positive here still. So we have some support. Let's look at Apple. Huge winner. Don't need to say much about it. Okay, did call it. I've called Apple successfully a lot. Even I was probably one of the few people who actually showed Apple on this massive cup and handle breakout. This is earnings back in April, end of April, and it happened. Okay, So now we're just consolidating. This is a very, very constructive chart, long-term chart. We are seeing Apple basically at this point. We got 624, and the top end of the channel is 643. Okay, so 624, 643. That's 20 points and 40 points. Downside, it breaks below this. This is the cup breakout right here. So if it breaks below, let's say 588, we're gonna come and see 576 fast. The gap, the infamous gap, earnings gap, is right here. This is the gap, as you can clearly see, is 533 to 560. Can it come and test this? It sure can. It can definitely test the upper gap. I doubt if it's going to fall into the lower gap. We do have a somewhat negative divergence here on the daily. If you notice, the histogram is somewhat negative as it's making newer highs, but that's minor. RSI still pointing up, OBV starting to come up, the MACD still up here, wanting to curl up more. So overall, Apple's in good shape, and unless we see a break of 585 to 589, let's say 589, at that point this comes into play. Just so you know, the 562, 575 to 562. Make a long story short, if the market cooperates, we are looking at 624 and 646. Maybe by the first week in June, when the stock splits 7-for-1. So that's it for now on Apple. Let's move on to Netflix. Huge winner, beautiful chart. Don't need to say much, Look at this daily chart. This is a monster. Made a very decent sum today on the weekly calls as well as on the common, but primarily on the weekly calls. Let me do this for all of you. So look at this. It broke out. Right now Netflix is right here. 377 is a little bit of resistance, and then I drew the uptrend line from all the way back in January of 2013, and that basically brings it up to 396. Call it 400. So Netflix would want to go to 400 if the market cooperates and the Nasdaq doesn't completely melt down. If it does melt down, these are the downside targets to keep in mind. The stock is basically going to plummet and come down to 325. That's 50 points roughly. Okay, 46 points. Or it finds support here. Let's look at it closely. At the confluence of these moving averages, we're starting to cross over, and that would bring it into the 346 level. So roughly about 25 points from where it is today. But this looks very constructive. Look at these histograms exploding up. That's power. And this is in the midst of a sell-off today. Okay, so I don't need to say much. So it looks like it wants to go up to about 381, 10 points from here before it stalls, because that's where it stalled last time, that 380. And that's Netflix. Give you a little picture. Let me look at I covered Google. Let me cover VIPS. This thing is a beast. This thing looks like now wants to basically go to this corner, wants to go back to 180. What's the downside? The downside is it comes down and retests this line here at 162. So 7 points on the downside. And if it breaks that, then we got some room to fall. We could fall down to about 150, but I think it holds 160 on a market related type of pullback. Numbers were phenomenal in the company. These guys are a monster. Okay, and the top end is 177 to 180. This is VIP, worth keeping it, not worth, definite trade. Options are a little funky, but they move. You have to be patient. OBV is moving up, RSI is curling up, internals are positive. So I believe this whole pattern, that's why I drew this box, repeats itself and the stock goes back to 183. downside levels I've marked, that if it breaks below 160, it's going to come down and retest 150. I don't think it goes a little bit below that, given the fact that the earnings are supporting this, are out of the way. Okay, we're going to close this particular video and move on to the next one.